Hello ladies and gentlemen and fellas, and welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about the history of a dead server in Minecraft. This server had a long history over the course of 2 years, but in that 2 years many things have happened. Let's start at the start. The birth of the SMP. The server had been run after me, which we'll just refer to in third person for narrative reasons. Had gotten an ad thousands of times. He really hated this ad and still gets it to this day occasionally. However, had not really considered what the ad was. It was advertising a company or whatever that would host servers, and for pretty cheap. YY gave it a shot and opened up the SMP. Originally, for a very short while, it was stuck on 1.9 instead of 1.19. However, he later fixed this issue. Later on, the SMP would have a new player, which we think wants to remain anonymous, so we will refer to them as M. The new player hung out with YY for a short while, until they both left spawn and decided to make a base. Now this base was between spawn and the base was a large amount of mountains, a giant grassy field next to them, and many other things. However, YY had still decided to go there for no reason. Anyways, after YY and M had constructed the base, it was a little wooden base on the beach, and it was very simple. However, YY and M were bored, and they messed around in create mode. This had resulted in the creation of one of the server's most infamous type of items, command items. These would be items that were normal to the game, but were somehow altered in an extreme way with commands. One of these items was a iron sword that had 1000 sharpness. Another was a set of armor that gave you extra HP and movement speed. And as you can see, these items were probably going to be an issue. Later on, YYM had decided to bury these items into a mountainside, which was then later turned into a giant obsidian structure. The items were defended by commands that if anyone got too close, they would get flung, so they couldn't get to him. This also affected people in creative mode. Soon, these items were very valuable, as you couldn't get them anymore, and the system they used to spawn them was broken. YY and M, however, had decided to make a little town and stop messing with the items. They had both beaten the Ender Dragon, and they had both beaten the Wither. They had a cute little town, and it was doing pretty well. Occasionally, other players would join the server and hang around with them. However, something bad would soon occur. M would soon, unknown to this day, he obtained one of the exploited items, a iron sword that had sharpness 100. He hid his base. However, YY soon discovered he had this sword when he was looking around Moore's base to get loot because he was stealing. However, either way, they found the item, and the sword was not meant to be there. YY had taken it and placed it on a mountain, in front of which he spawned a fireball with a 100 explosive power and punched it towards the mountain. It was very slow, however, and during the time it was traveling, YY and M had fought, YY losing. However, M didn't have enough time to stop it. The fireball destroyed the sword. Later on, Wildwood would craft his own version of the sword. However, he had buried it underground, deep underground. It was surrounded by traps that even creative mode players would have a bit of trouble getting into. And it was designed so if anyone did ever get to the item, it would bury the entire mountain above it onto the players. This was not the same mountain that the sword was originally blown up on. The sword was still somehow stolen by ensued, and either way it resulted in the same demise as the first. The only difference, we still to this day have no evidence that it was actually destroyed. All we know is that it was on the mountain while the mountain was destroyed, so it might still be out there. Well, it won't, because, well, you'll see that. Later on, had gained a pet cow that he named Mr. Moo. Mr. Moo was a goofy little fella that more often than not YY would take care of, and he'd keep it alive. However, YY had also had a few of his cows that were all named German stuff, and Mr. Moo was just sitting in his base, and Mr. Moo was the most prized pet in the server at the time. No one was allowed to harm it or to damage it. However, the server would run into a problem. The server had to reset due to complications, and they could only fit a certain amount of things into a save file before they transfer it to the new version of the server. One of these things being Mr. Moo, some of the banned items that weren't too powerful, and a few other things. Mr. Moo managed to be copied over to the new version of the server. However, his location was still unknown. In the new server, everyone was forced into survival mode, and it was a giant Arctic frozen area. During this new server, M had decided to make a little base, which YY had helped with. Oh, 1 second, I dropped my script. Now, M and YY, their new base was built into a tiny little hill that was only about 5 to 7 blocks tall. However, it was going to be a lot of history inside of this base. Inside of this base, YY had finally spawned in Mr. Moo and dragged him over to the base and kept him there, where M would keep him as a pet. Mr. Moo would sit there and kind of just be in the background for a long time. During this, due to miscommunication, M and YY had gotten into a combat with each other once more. This conflict resulted in many mobs and players viewing the conflict, and during it, YY and M would run over to the spawn, where most ice was at. YY would build up on a cobblestone tower, while M would build after him. YY dropped a TNT off the side, flinging M off the side. During this, YY would start to construct a small flying machine while trying to fight off M. After he finished the flying machine, he sent it towards their base, which M had more things in than YY. The flying machine would soon crash into the base, spilling TNT everywhere and destroying many of M's pets. YY did not know the pets were inside of the base at the time, and later on, after the war had ended, YY and M had made a funeral and gravestones for all the innocent pets lost. Later on, YY had decided to leave the base, as now the area was just filled to the brim with craters and pits down to bedrock from all the explosions and combat. YY's new base was a small little castle type of formation he built far away from M. Occasionally, players would join the server, yet no one could find the base, as it was extremely far away. Even some of YY's subscribers had tried to look for his base, and failed completely. This castle was never, ever shown on camera in any of his videos, but it was basically a cobblestone box, with Mr. Moo in the corner of it, and a bunch of loot in the right, and a mine shaft in the back. It was built into a small hill. YY had decided he would start to expand it. He started by adding more farms out front, a potato farm and a little potato store, along with another portal and some other things. Soon enough, he constructed a massive cobblestone block around the base. However, M had found his base. During the time that M had spent during the war, M had also gained a lot of the banned items. However, YY and M got rid of them, not caring. Little to M's knowledge, there was a small player's base outside of their own that they couldn't see. This base, thankfully, did not harm them, but instead would establish a few trade routes with YY in exchange for higher ranking commands in the server. Later on, YY and M would hang out in the base and build more walls around it, until this one other player, who, to YY and our knowledge, we do not know much about, had declared war on M and YY. We do not, to this day, know what exactly he did, but we do know some of the things he did, some of which included bombing a large portion of the base, removing much of the loot, and damaging Mr. Moo. He later on fizzled out, and no one really knows what happened to him. Later on, the players started playing more with creative mode, as they were getting bored once more. However, during these creative mode shenanigans, YY had spawned a creature that would be stronger than any other mob in the server. YY calls it, most people just call it an armor stand. YY calls it the death machine. Dramatic effect. The death machine was an armor stand controlled by 5 command blocks, one of which would constantly heal it, the second would constantly look towards the nearest player, third would move the armor stand 1 step to the nearest player every second, the fourth would destroy any blocks in its way, and the fifth would instantaneously kill every player it touches, even in creative mode. The armor stand could not be outflown with creative mode flight, and could not be outran with speed 2. It was unstoppable, until the command blocks for it were shut down in combat. YY had ran up to them and broken its core moving systems before disabling its attack systems and dropping the armor stand out of the sky. The armor stand landed inside of snow and was never seen again. During this, M had constructed a tiny bunker, maybe to protect himself from the armor stand, but no one knows for sure what it was for. Either way, he had a bunker, and inside of which were many new items, some of which could kill in creative, some of which were stronger than anything else in the server, and one of which was a button. The button did nothing. I don't know what you expected. However, back at the old base, he had another button. M had moved back into the old base, the one where all the conflicts in the first war had started, and he would construct a large fortress inside of it. It still looked abandoned and ruined on the outside. However, in a secret room in it, there was the base. Inside of this base, there was a button. This button, however, didn't do nothing. This button was able to power a chain of explosions that would self-destruct every base in the server, including YY's base. YY visited M in the old base, and he explored his base while M was not online, or not nearby at least. However, M did find YY, and YY pushed the button, not knowing what it would do. The bombs had exploded. At first it was just a small chain, but it rapidly grew, flinging itself towards the base. This was something that nothing could survive. Not Mr. Moo, not the armor stand, nothing. The explosion went off and blew out a large, enormous 70% of the base. YY then ignored more and then continued fixing up the base. Soon enough, the server slowly stopped being rejoined. No new players joined in, as it was mostly empty. The new base was in ruins, just as the old one was, and there was nothing left to do. There were some other players' bases still left, and the server is still up to this day for anyone to join and look back at the history on. If you want to know where M's base was, there are two Among Us figures around it. If you want to know where YY's base is, it's far, far behind M's base. The server is still running to this day, and you can always join it.